Hello once again. This is the noob DM Ariel. Hi, how are you guys doing? Um, I off the bat would like to say that sorry I haven't been putting up too many videos lately. It's been a couple weeks, but I did have one prepared, but there were some technical issues again. Had some live game footage that wasn't exactly uh going through or wasn't really acting the way it should. I'm not exactly sure why, whether it's my processor and I have to improve the the computer processing period access or whether it was the frame rate. I noticed that some games that are older or tend to have a different type of coding will stream better than others. So I might focus on those in the near future. But at any rate, I'm back today to speak about D&D on Dungeons and Dragons Saturday, and I hope that you will continue to enjoy this series based on Dungeons and Dragons. And specifically, I don't have last video. I think I was talking in general terms about some of the classes found in the second edition because I had just received my copy of the AD&D second edition player's handbook and was kind of getting familiar with how that system played because I never really played it. Was more familiar with first edition, but they're not a whole lot of differences between first and second. They just sort of cleaned it up, and there are some differences, but they're not significant as a transition from, say, something like second to third edition. For sure, that was a huge jump away. A lot of changes in those in both the presentation and the game mechanics and rule set, and similarly to the jump from third edition to fourth edition or 3.5 to fourth, where it's just night and day. Fourth edition is like so much different than anything that came before it, and as we know now, anything that came after. So, um, but focusing on second edition um, led me to sort of do some comparisons between the present game. Currently, I am engaged in a fifth edition, a couple of fifth edition campaigns over at the local hobby shop. Once the COVID cases started dropping down, they allowed um, playing around the table with masking and some COVID precautions. So I did, and I was fully vaccinated, so I went over and I started playing a couple of games and was engaged in fifth edition. Now I hadn't played fifth edition in over 3 years. I hadn't played a lot of D&D to be honest in that time frame because life and other things get in the way. So today, what I wanted to do was sort of take a look. Now that I have a little bit of more recent fifth edition experience under my belt, with which is an interesting system. I have been fortunate to have had a couple of good game DMs or good game masters running some of those sessions. I would say not the best, but definitely very creative, a lot of imagination. That you could tell that they put in a lot of work into writing some of their sessions or crafting some of their game sessions. So I appreciated that as a player, as always. And as a new DM myself, hoping to run um, a D&D session, honestly say that I'll run any system, but I'm really interested in running like an old school campaign now because some of those um, systems were uh, really fun. And look, going back to like examining some of the overall classes and some of the game mechanics, I really like what I know so far of something like second edition, for example. And that's what I kind of wanted to touch upon. Not so much a a compare and contrast between like second and third or fourth or whatever edition you happen to like. I think they're all great, and I'm not here to try to stoke the flames or try to you know, stoke a discussion or trying to say fifth edition is not good or fourth edition it was terrible or anything like that. I mean, I think that I've said many times before that if you have a good game master, then you can enjoy and they prepare and the group is good, then you can enjoy whatever system you're using or you're utilizing at the time. But at any rate, uh, I wanted to focus or to have the focus of the video today be about why I some of the issues, some of I do have some issues with fifth edition versus like the AD&D, for example, and I wanted to sort of give my take on what I think magic system, for example, spell casting is a big part, always been a big part of the fantasy RPG trope, and definitely a part of D&D. And I wanted to give my take on why I think currently I kind of like the AD&D older version a lot better than the current version. And overall, there are some issues with fifth edition that I see or that I've firsthand experienced now, just a little bit. I'm not by any means any expert that I wanted to broach, to approach, and to discuss. So let's go ahead and dive into those. The third edition campaign that I was doing via Zoom, and then later on in fifth edition, I started playing a cleric. I'm pretty a little bit more familiar with spellcasting classes, especially the clerics. Although I have sort of looked into the magic system for fifth edition as well, the current edition as well as like other editions, uh and with an eye towards examining what the cleric does. I don't want to get too bogged down or make this video be entirely lengthy or too long. So we'll just get into a discussion of the magic system. And in uh, in the fifth edition, current edition of the game, magic is pretty straightforward. It's like you pick whatever spellcaster you're going to play. And pretty much any class actually can have access to spells, or a lot of the classes, a lot more classes should have can have access to spells. But one key difference in fifth edition is that your characters, your spellcasters, seem to be more powerful right off the bat. And this is a criticism from some of the old RPG or D&D game players, tabletop players from the past. They don't like this aspect of, and I can see why, where a lot of the characters will, and I can see why Wizards of the Coast made it this way in the modern game, where a lot of the characters right off the bat, first level, you'll have more functionality or more to do or more powers, um, than you did back in the old days, And what I mean by this is something like cantrips, for example. Cantrips are spells that can be used at will without using a spell slot and without being prepared in advance. So basically, the concept is that I think I've talked about this before when I talked about spell casting, so I won't go too much into it. But basically, you can do these spells and at any time you can use them at will. Um, if you use a fourth edition concept of at will power versus utility power or daily power, if you ever played fourth edition, you remember those concepts which came directly from video game perspectives where you had your character, but there are some powers that you can use um, whenever you want. And that's kind of like what the cantrip is in fifth edition, So it's basically a spell that's available for you. You don't have to memorize it. You don't have to prepare it. It doesn't matter whether you're a wizard or a cleric. You can use the cantrips anytime, and then you can cast a spell. You don't have to rest. 'Cause a lot of the spells that the wizards have access in their spell books, you expend so much energy that after you cast a spell, you're all spent. Theoretically, it's an elaborate process, which it requires either like verbal incantations, which is what I'm doing here, semantic moving of the arms, and hocus pocus, and a material component a lot of the times. So you'll have your staff, or you'll have you kind of crafting a recipe of some magic amulet or something that would allow you to channel that those energies into some magical spell. Um, and so yeah, but in fifth edition, you can do cantrips anytime. And furthermore, right off the bat, depends on your class because bookmark the cleric here as an example. So a first level cleric in the fifth edition game will have a +2 bonus proficiency, and he will be able to do divine and domain spell casting, but he'll know um, uh, 3 cantrips and he'll know two first level spells. And then if you advance all the way to like or further up to like third level, for example, my DM was like, okay, well you're coming into this game, we're already kind of started, but everybody's at third level, so we'll just make your character bump you up to third level, so you don't even have to start at the first level. So at third level, my cleric had a +2 proficiency, and knew 3 cantrips and 4 first level spells. So right off the bat, that's 7 spells, and that doesn't even include the extra powers that the cleric is usually granted by virtue of his class, such as the divine. I forget what they're called, but basically domain. That's what it is. Domain. So you every cleric belongs to like a domain. So you can be like a a war domain cleric. So you focus on war. So you get some advantages of wearing shields and actually going into battle versus another cleric that might be into nature, and so they worship or they answer or they get their powers from the gods of nature, from nature itself, or so, god of nature, and therefore they have nature based powers, which I always thought was kind of weird, by the way. It's like, if you're gonna play a cleric that has a nature divine, then why not just be a druid? But I guess there's some specific powers that come with the cleric, depending on the divine. But my point is, I digress. What I want to try to say, the third level already has 7 spells that they can use right off the bat, not including their domain power, and then they have other extra bonuses or powers that they can use just by virtue of their class. So it's night and day. And then you take a look at the what is it called? There's the domain spells, and there's also the bonuses that the clerics great proficiencies. They have their proficiencies, but they also have the forget what they call it, but it's basically some extra powers that they get just by virtue of being a cleric. One important thing is they can turn the undead. So we're gonna talk a little bit about undead creatures and why I think undead creatures were better. Actually, were actually improved in or were already good in earlier editions, but they kind of got nerfed a little bit, in my opinion. They got nerfed starting with maybe third or fourth edition for sure, and like the vampire, for example, or the white, or a number of undead. But the cleric has always had the power to turn on that. Go away. Have the power to turn on the undead. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, fifth edition casters pretty powerful, depending on the class. I think the mentality was Wizards of the Coast was like they play tested or they heard a lot of complaints from the older, or just in general. Well, if you're a magic user in the past, you had like one spell, or you had to really advance to get more powerful. And obviously, as you advance, you get more powerful, you get more access to more powerful spells. That's still the case because this first level spells are no joke. Some of them are powerful, but um, and then obviously you can use them. Spells go from 0 to 9 in fifth edition, and I think third edition as well. So 0 to 9, zero being the obviously the less powerful, all the way up to 9, but they don't correspond with your character level. So if you're a ninth level wizard or a ninth level cleric, doesn't necessarily mean you have. In fact, doesn't mean that you have access to ninth level wizards because they're independent levels. It's not the progression of the characters, the progression of the spells, which is a little confusing to noobish or new players playing the game. But that's the way it is. Now that it doesn't really matter too much whether you're when you go. I mean, I joined a fifth edition campaign, a third edition cleric, and already off the bat I have 7 spells, not counting those divine class or other domain class spells. So that's a big difference, and it makes a difference in gameplay. And some people like it, some people don't, but you have to be aware that that's the case. Okay, guys. Well, now transitioning to taking a look at the differences with the second edition um, game overall, and Magic system, just the game system overall. I will have to say that some of the reasons, if I would, some of the reasons why I would play a sec or run a second definitely play and definitely want to run a second edition campaign AD&D is because of the differences in progression and the differences in the how the classes work in terms of not just spellcasting for the spellcasters, but also how the game mechanics, I guess, with each different class. I wanted to touch a little bit on it. I can't. Maybe I'll do a second video, sort of elaborating on this point, because I don't want this one to be too long. It's already kind of getting on the long side. But um, the one thing that's different about uh, fifth edition, um, which I think started in fourth. I'm don't quote me that I might be mistaken, but I believe it started in fourth. The fifth edition um, progression of levels is the same for every character and every class. So it doesn't matter what you are, if you're a wizard or you're a fighter or it doesn't matter what you are. You're basically gonna level at the same rate. Everybody gains XP or experience at the same level as everybody else. And I I see the logic behind it, but then I'm taking a look at the other systems. I don't know. I can't help but feel that it's a little bit more unique and more balanced. Therefore, in the older editions, it's unique. It's a unique system where everybody had a different level progression. You know, if you were a magic user or a wizard, for example, um, you would level uh, to second level from 0 to it would take 2500 2500 XP to just get to second level on a wizard. And I was looking at the clerics because uh, in second edition they're kind of broken up into groups. So they have the wizards and the mages and the cleric. They're all in their different character groups. And I think the cleric, pretty sure cleric falls under the priest. So if you look on priest, then they call him priest, which is basically the cleric, and I think maybe the druid. And I don't know if I'm forgetting other classes, but definitely the cleric. And so, yeah, cleric and druid are the priest classes. And so, at level one, in second edition, you obviously have no experience points. But by the time you get to level two, you have to earn 1,500 1,500 experience points. And level three, you have to be at 3,000 if you're a cleric. If you're a druid, it takes longer, so you got to get 4,000 experience. So it's 1,000 more, a difference of 1,000 experience points just to get to third level according to the player's handbook, which is a huge difference. The new game or the Dungeons and Dragons fifth edition, I think all characters get to third level, but you only need like 1,000. I could be wrong. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's definitely not 3,000 or 4,000. Something like 900 to 1,000 XP, and everybody goes at the same rate. And what tends to happen is, what if you specialize? I mean, to me, it makes sense that a wizard would progress in experience way different or somewhat different than say a cleric or say a fighter, because if you're a wizard, you're specializing in a profession. You have to study your spells. You have to study with a master or a mentor, whereas other classes do other things. So I really like the fact that you could specialize, and I'm not even talking about like dual specialization, where you can have multiple classes in the same character. That's a whole different discussion. I'm just talking about regular characters, regular level progression, where it was harder to get from level one to level three. So what happens in a fifth edition campaign, like the one I joined recently, and I had a cleric right off the bat? Well, I was third level already, so I had a bunch of powers that I wouldn't necessarily have. And I know that the experience points are scaled differently, and the math is different from from edition to edition. And I know that fifth edition is a way different game, but overall, to me, it seems as though the problem I have with it is the character on the progression part of it. It's like they want people to play. They want it to be more mainstream, so they play test. I don't know how thoroughly they play tested, but they said, okay, research shows that if we want to get more people into our game, then we're gonna give them like more to do, and it's going to be easier to level up. Therefore, we'll have more people excited about rolling a character, and we'll have more people participating in games. And I see the logic behind that, and it worked. I mean, right now D&D is more popular than ever. It's pretty mainstream, but I think you lose a little bit of the flavor, a little bit of um, the magic. You pardon the pun, from the older edition to the new edition, when people can just, I mean, with your cleric and your divine power alone, let's say you have a warhammer, because if you're a cleric and you have a war domain, I keep calling it divine power, but it's domain power. So if you have a domain, if you're a war domain cleric, and you have like and you're proficient because your class gives you, I think your race, I think in this case it was a race because I was playing a dwarf cleric. So your race gives you proficiency with a warhammer right off the bat, and you can do extra damage on your attack roll just by virtue of the fact that you belong to the war domain. They just give you that power. So you're you're kind of a badass just right off the bat. But second edition, older editions, you had to, um, if you were a priest category, for example, on your spell progression side of things, by the time you get to third level, you have a total of three spells. Three spells. One first level spell, and no, two first level spells, and one. I'm sorry, two first level and one second level. So two and one. That's three total. Versus what was it? Seven in third level. It's crazy. You're like, so I heard people say that some people don't like the fact that some of the older players don't like fifth edition, the fact that you can roll up a powerful character, and then by the time you progress to like higher levels, you're almost like a superhero. So the DM has to work towards have more challenges, and it just feels like more of an easy mode. The one comparison I can say, for the video game players, is like, um, World of Warcraft Classic versus retail or modern Warcraft, where they changed the game through the expansions and changing the rules and adding more features to get more people involved in the game system, to get more people to subscribe, because WoW is a subscription game. You got to pay to play. And so a subscription fee. And in order to get that revenue and to get their numbers up, they're like, well, and also because, they get bored of the old system, whatever. So they keep adding to it. But you lose some of the mechanics that were actually fun or in the player's mind. And so they had to go back reluctantly. They didn't want to do it at first. Reluctantly, they went back to the old mechanics, and they came out with WoW Classic uh, 2 years ago now. It's crazy. And WoW Classic incorporates some of the old game mechanics, and it's harder. Like, it takes longer to level, and it takes longer to get into raids. You know what I'm saying? It takes longer to do everything, and the world feels dangerous when you're in a fantasy world and you're fighting orcs or you're going up against a wizard or whatever. You want to have a sense of dread. I think, I do. And that's why PvP was so popular, because people would be on a PvP server, and you don't have to have your PvP flag out. You just go into a PvP territory, and you could get ganked, and you could get killed by another player. That's You frequently got clanked by higher level players. They don't care. They don't have the honor or whatever. They just want to kill you and gain experience or whatever. And so the world felt dangerous. The same thing I think goes for Dungeons and Dragons, where I like the fact that the older edition, at least from what I've seen in terms of experience and character progression, which I just talked about, and definitely with the spellcasters where you have a specialty. I mean, back in second edition, you did have things like the illusionist, and you had your specialty classes where you had to spend some time into you know, specializing into whatever, and you get some bonuses by whatever class. Like, let's say if you got your spells from the School of Alteration, you couldn't do abjuration spells because they were the exact opposite for some reason. You couldn't do it. Although I guess, I mean, if the DM said you could, there's no, I mean, this is just guidelines, right? You could do it if you wanted to, but that was just the only restriction. But and what I'm trying to get at is, if you were a specialist in the school of necromancy, you're a necromancer, necromancer. then you specialize in that, but it takes longer to get. I mean, it should be a different progression to get if you're studying evil or dark arts versus other types of spells. You know, it stands to reason that it wouldn't take the same. So why would progression be the same, and why would getting those the number of spells be the same? There's other differences too that I might talk about in a later video, but those are some of the main issues that I had where with character progression now being uniform in fifth edition kind of takes away a little bit from the enjoyment of the game, unless you want to play a superhero right off the bat, and good for you. But the DM has to work harder to present some challenges, and it just kind of breaks the system a little bit, I think, and especially at higher levels. And the second thing is for the spell with the spellcasters, where they're not specialized, so they're all progressing, at the same time. And it's not like they don't start off pretty powerful to begin with. I mean, you have the cantrips, and you get like X number of cantrips, which back in the day I think we referred to them as like zero level spells, and there weren't that many because you didn't get that many to begin with if you were a first level character.